Most people think Great War cinema didn't exist until the 90s, but here's the shocking truth. The decade after World War II ended produced some of the most authentic, brutal, and honestly forgotten masterpieces ever committed to film. These aren't the movies your film professor mentioned. These are the ones that got buried under decades of bigger budgets and flashier CGI, and today we're counting down 12 of them that absolutely deserve your attention. Let's go. Number 12. The Bridge on the River Kwai, 1957. David Lean's masterpiece absolutely dominates any discussion about 1950s war cinema, but most people still don't understand why this film matters beyond its pretty locations and fancy cinematography. This isn't just a war movie about prisoners building a bridge in Burma. It's a psychological thriller about obsession, pride, and the terrifying blurred line between duty and collaboration. Alec Guinness delivers one of cinema's greatest performances as Colonel Nicholson, a man so consumed with British military honor that he loses sight of everything else, including the fact that his men are working for their enemies. The production was absolutely bonkers. David Lean demanded authenticity to a psychotic degree, which meant actually building a real railway bridge that the crew then had to deliberately destroy on film. They constructed the bridge using 10,000 bamboo poles in the jungles of Sri Lanka, and the heat was so intense that crew members were collapsing daily. Lean hired Buddhist monks to work on set because he believed their presence would bring spiritual authenticity to the project. The bridge itself cost over $2 million in 1950s money, equivalent to nearly $30 million today. What absolutely kills about this film is its moral ambiguity. You watch Guinness's character making decisions that feel noble until you realize they're actually betrayals. The orchestra score by Malcolm Arnold is so manipulatively perfect that you feel sympathy for a man who's literally helping the Japanese military. When the bridge gets destroyed in the final act, you don't celebrate. You feel devastated. The film won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, and it became the highest-grossing film of 1958 worldwide. But here's the wild part. Initial critics thought it was too long, too slow, and too sympathetic to the British military establishment. They were completely wrong. Number 11, From Here to Eternity, 1953. This film exploded onto screens like a grenade nobody saw coming, and it genuinely changed what American cinema could depict about military life and desire. Fred Zinnemann's masterpiece follows the interconnected lives of soldiers stationed at Pearl Harbor in 1941, right before the Japanese attack that would plunge America into World War II. But this isn't a traditional war film. It's intimate, character-driven, and absolutely unafraid to show how boredom, forbidden relationships, and personal conflict matter just as much as combat. The most iconic scene in cinema history happens on a Hawaiian beach where Burt Lancaster and Deborah Kerr embrace in the ocean waves while the camera captures pure passion and recklessness. That scene caused absolute hysteria in 1953. Religious groups protested it. Censors debated cutting it. Conservative critics called the film immoral and corrupting. The Catholic League actually condemned it publicly, but audiences showed up in unprecedented numbers because that scene felt dangerous and real in ways Hollywood had never allowed before. The moment made Lancaster a megastar and proved that war films could explore human emotion beyond explosions and heroics. Montgomery Clift delivers a career-defining performance as a soldier who refuses to join the boxing program, which earns him brutal treatment from his unit. His scenes are emotionally devastating. Frank Sinatra plays a drummer who practically steals the entire film with charisma and vulnerability. The movie won 8 Academy Awards and became the second highest-grossing film of 1953. What's stunning is how the film quietly comments on class hierarchy, military corruption, and how powerful institutions crush individual will. The attack on Pearl Harbor that happens at the film's climax lands like a gut punch because we've spent so much time loving these characters. We don't want them to die. Number 10, A Man Escaped, 1956. Robert Bresson created something absolutely revolutionary with this deceptively simple film about a French resistance fighter planning his escape from a Nazi prison during World War II. André Devigny actually lived through the real imprisonment that inspired this movie, and Bresson's direction is so meticulous, so focused on the smallest details of survival, that watching this feels like meditation rather than cinema. The film barely contains any traditional action sequences. Instead, Bresson films the accumulation of tiny moments: a guard's footstep pattern, the sound of a door hinge, the way light passes through a prison cell window. The cinematography is gorgeous in its severity. Black and white photography that makes every object feel significant and heavy with meaning. A spoon becomes a tool of liberation. A bedsheet transforms into an escape rope. The film trusts the audience completely, allowing tension to build through silence and suggestion rather than dramatic music swells or quick editing. Bresson cast non-professional actors, which gives everything a documentary quality that completely elevates the material. The lead actor was recruited from theater rather than cinema, which means his performance feels utterly genuine and never slips into Hollywood artificiality. Number 9. The Dam Busters, 1955. Michael Anderson directed what might be the most technically impressive British war film ever made, and the fact that it's barely remembered today is genuinely criminal. The film chronicles Operation Chastise, the 1943 RAF bombing mission to destroy German dams, using a revolutionary bouncing bomb designed by engineer Barnes Wallis. This wasn't just a military operation, it was one of the most audacious engineering feats in warfare history, and the movie captures both the technical brilliance and human courage required to pull it off. The production design is absolutely stunning. The filmmakers built elaborate miniatures and full-scale sets that showcase the dams with incredible detail. The flying sequences were filmed using actual RAF aircraft and real pilots, which gives the aerial combat an authenticity that still holds up today. Michael Redgrave plays Wallace with quiet determination, showing the engineering genius as a man wrestling with his creation's consequences. Richard Todd, who actually flew in World War II, brings his real military experience to every scene, and his performance carries the weight of actual sacrifice. What makes this film extraordinary is how it balances technical exposition with emotional storytelling. Younger audiences might think a film about dam destruction sounds boring, but Anderson crafts genuine suspense around the engineering challenges. Will the bomb work? Can the pilots navigate through anti-aircraft fire to reach the target? What happens when brave men undertake impossible missions? The film won the Academy Award for Best Sound, and the famous march from the film's score became iconic in British culture. But here's the crucial context. The actual operation resulted in massive German casualties among civilians living downstream from the dams. The film largely sidesteps this moral complexity, presenting the mission as straightforward heroism. That's historically problematic by modern standards, but it doesn't diminish the film's technical achievements or its power as cinema. Number 8. Attack, 1956. Robert Aldrich crafted an absolutely brutal examination of military hierarchy and cowardice with this film that absolutely should be discussed alongside Paths of Glory as one of the greatest critiques of military command ever filmed. Jack Palance plays a sergeant in a rifle company during the Battle of the Bulge, and his mission is straightforward: lead an attack on a German position. But his commanding officer, played by Lee Marvin with chilling coldness, is a coward more interested in protecting his own career advancement than in the lives of his men. The tension between these two creates unbearable pressure throughout the narrative. Aldrich doesn't glamorize warfare for a single moment. The battle sequences are chaotic, confused, and devastating. Soldiers die suddenly and meaninglessly. Orders are contradictory. Communication breaks down. The film presents combat as organized chaos, where individual bravery means nothing when leadership is corrupt. Jack Palance's performance captures the fury of a soldier watching his men die because his superior is incompetent and selfish. The final confrontation between these two characters is one of cinema's most powerful moments, because we understand that the real war isn't between nations but between good men and those who abuse power. Number 7. Men of the Fighting Lady, 1954. This film barely gets mentioned in war cinema discussions, which is absolutely tragic because it's genuinely one of the most technically impressive and historically significant naval war films ever made. The story follows pilots and sailors aboard an aircraft carrier during the Korean War. But the fascinating aspect is that the production was essentially a collaboration between MGM and the United States Navy. The filmmakers got access to real aircraft carriers, real combat footage, and genuine military consultation that gives the film an authenticity that pure fiction could never achieve. The production itself was monumentally ambitious. Director Andrew Martin and his crew shot aboard the USS Yorktown and USS Intrepid, meaning the actors were performing on actual military vessels while surrounded by real sailors conducting real operations. The flying sequences featured genuine military aircraft and genuine combat situations, which means the danger to the cast was very real. Some of the aerial combat footage is actual gun camera film from real dogfights over Korea, integrated seamlessly into the narrative. Van Johnson and Walter Pidgeon lead capable performances that feel grounded because they're surrounded by authentic military atmosphere. Number 6. The Crimson Pirate, 1952. Wait, you're probably wondering why a pirate film shows up on a war movies list. Here's why. This Burt Lancaster vehicle from John Farrow might be the most creative reinterpretation of historical conflict ever filmed. disguised as a swashbuckling adventure that absolutely transcends its genre. The film is technically set in a vague historical period where a pirate captain and his crew get caught up in a Caribbean rebellion against oppressive colonial powers. But Lancaster plays the role with such anarchic charm and genuine revolutionary sympathy that the film becomes a genuine political statement wrapped in adventure entertainment. The production design creates a completely stylized universe where physics barely matter and heroic action trumps realistic consequences. There's a famous scene where Lancaster's character uses homemade explosives and mechanical gadgets that look like something out of a Jules Verne novel. The cinematography is vibrant and dynamic, using color cinematography in ways that most war films of the era completely ignored. Lancaster insisted on doing his own stunts, and at his age, the physical performance is genuinely impressive. He's swinging between ships and engaging in hand-to-hand combat while clearly doing as much of the work as he safely could. Number 5. The Desert Rats, 1953. Henry Hathaway directed this underrated gem about the British forces during the North African campaign against Rommel and his Afrika Korps, and the film genuinely deserves recognition as one of the finest portrayals of desert warfare ever created. James Mason absolutely owns every scene as a sophisticated German general commanding his troops with professional respect for his enemies. Richard Burton, in an early career role, plays a British officer leading a ragtag unit of soldiers who must hold a strategic position against overwhelming odds. The dynamic between these two commanders forms the emotional core of the narrative. What makes this film special is its balanced portrayal of opposing forces. Mason's Rommel isn't demonized or caricatured. He's presented as a brilliant tactician and professional soldier who respects the rules of warfare. Burton's character embodies British resilience and determination. The film explores how warfare can occur between honorable men, even though they fight for opposite sides. The action sequences in the desert are genuinely impressive for 1953 filmmaking. The cinematography captures both the beauty and the brutal harshness of the North African landscape. Sandstorms become cinematically stunning while remaining terrifying. The tank battles feel substantial and real. Number 4. A Time to Love and a Time to Die, 1958. Douglas Sirk created something absolutely fascinating with this German-American co-production that tells a love story within the chaos of World War II's final days on the Eastern Front. The film follows a Wehrmacht soldier on leave who meets and falls in love with a young woman in Berlin, but their time together is constantly interrupted by the encroaching Soviet forces and the inevitable collapse of Nazi Germany. The premise sounds like tragic romance, but Sirk's direction gives it genuine depth and complexity that transcends mere sentimentality. What's remarkable about this film is its presentation of ordinary Germans caught in extraordinary circumstances. The protagonist isn't fighting because he believes in Nazi ideology. He's fighting because he was conscripted, and now he's trying to survive and experience love before everything collapses. The film presents civilians and soldiers equally caught in historical forces beyond their control. Sirk refuses to simplify moral questions or present good versus evil in easy categories. Instead, he shows individuals struggling to maintain humanity while surrounded by inhumanity and systemic violence. The cinematography is gorgeous in its exploration of Berlin's urban landscape, showing both beautiful architecture and devastating destruction. Number 3. A Town Like Alice, 1956. Jack Lee's film, based on Nevil Shute's acclaimed novel, presents one of the most authentic portrayals of civilian experience during Japanese occupation in World War II ever filmed. The story follows a young British woman and her experiences in a Japanese labor camp in Malaya, and the film refuses to sensationalize or exploit the horrific conditions. Instead, it presents the psychological and emotional toll of captivity with heartbreaking honesty. Virginia McKenna gives one of cinema's greatest performances as a woman trying to maintain her dignity and humanity while surrounded by dehumanizing circumstances. The production filmed on location in Malaysia, which meant the cast and crew were working in the actual climate and geography where the real events occurred. Director Jack Lee insisted on absolute authenticity, which meant depicting the malnutrition, disease, and emotional trauma without cinematic embellishment. The film shows the bonds that form between female prisoners as they support each other through impossible circumstances. Rather than portraying women as victims, the film emphasizes their agency, resilience, and strategic thinking necessary for survival. Men also appear in the film, but the focus remains firmly on the female experience of captivity. Number 2. The Hunted, 1952. Robert Aldrich created an absolutely nerve-shredding thriller about the Nazi occupation of Holland that works simultaneously as war film, psychological thriller, and existential horror. The story is deceptively simple. A group of resistance fighters struggles to survive and continue their operations while German forces close in around them. But Aldrich transforms this straightforward plot into an examination of paranoia, trust, and the psychological toll of living under occupation. Every scene radiates tension because everyone could be an informant. Every knock on the door could mean capture. The film was shot on location in Holland, which meant the cast and crew were working in the actual cities and locations where similar resistance operations had occurred just years earlier. That authentic setting creates an atmosphere that purely studio-bound production could never achieve. The cinematography is deliberately claustrophobic, using tight framing and shadow to emphasize confinement and danger. Aldrich refuses to offer moments of relief or comic levity. Instead, tension builds relentlessly throughout the narrative until the conclusion arrives as an almost cathartic release from unbearable pressure. The performances are uniformly excellent because the actors understood they were portraying real historical sacrifice. Number 1. Stalag 17, 1953. Billy Wilder created an absolute masterpiece with this film that functions simultaneously as war film, prison drama, mystery thriller, and comedy, yet never feels contradictory or confused. The story follows Allied prisoners in a German military prison camp where morale collapses when they discover a mysterious informant among their ranks. The situation creates suspicion and paranoia as prisoners turn against each other trying to identify the traitor. But Wilder's genius is allowing the film to be simultaneously funny and tragic, absurd and devastating, entertaining and morally complex. William Holden delivers a career-defining performance as the anti-hero protagonist who appears suspicious precisely because he's too comfortable in the prison camp. He trades black market goods, maintains relationships with guards, and lives better than his fellow prisoners. The other men resent him and suspect him of being the informant. Wilder explores how survival instincts can make people behave in ways that other people find contemptible. Holden's character isn't evil. He's just pragmatic about his situation in ways that his fellow prisoners find morally compromised. The tension between Holden's pragmatism and the other men's idealism creates constant dramatic friction. So there you have it, 12 films from the 1950s that absolutely prove this decade created some of the most authentic, complex, and visually stunning war cinema ever made. These aren't your grandfather's patriotic propaganda pieces. They're morally ambiguous masterpieces from a generation that had actually lived through warfare and understood its true cost. Here's my question for you. Why do we obsess over Spielberg and Nolan when directors like Billy Wilder and David Lean were already creating perfect war films decades earlier? Drop your favorite forgotten 1950s war film in the comments, and tell me this, are we too focused on modern spectacle to appreciate the subtle power of older cinema? Subscribe for more forgotten film classics, and I'll see you next time.